probably a good idea. That's probably a good idea. Have a little shot of something. Thank you. I saw you up at the state fair. I didn't get to talk to you. How'd the state fair go?
Actually, this year was pretty active. I ran out of Constitution pocketbooks.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
And we handed out a lot of those during parades and stuff. They were pretty popular. And the little flags. The clubs
Yeah, but I
always.
was also a little bit frightened at how many people had never
We're going to
actually
start
read the
here
Constitution.
right at 6 o'clock
Yeah.
for the forum.
Don't you in like a
We'll have
sixth
more
grade
of a
government
formal
class?
Introduction at that point, but at this point, for purposes, let's go ahead and just say the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll start with the forum. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I hit it from right.
You bring them in a snake.
Scared of snakes.
It would have bit me.
So again, thank you guys for coming tonight. We're going to get started here in just a moment as soon as Art gives me the thumbs up that we can start. Oh, I just got the thumbs up. So welcome to tonight's forum for candidates seeking to represent the Senate District and Senate District 6 and House District 60. I'm Gary Castor, Managing Editor of the Jefferson City News Tribune, and I'll serve as moderator of tonight's forum. Seated next to me will be Joe Gamm, a News Tribune reporter who will serve as timekeeper tonight. I want to take this opportunity to thank the city for use of the council chambers and for allowing us to hold the forum here, as well as JCTV for taping and airing the forum. We're also streaming the forums on newstribune.com. Tonight, our first forum will feature the candidates for Senate District 6. Prior to tonight, they were advised the rules of the forum, which will include opening statements, general questions for the candidates, and then closing statements. Candidates will be given 1 minute for their opening statement. I'll then begin asking a series of questions of the candidates. They'll have 2 minutes to respond to each question. None of these questions have been shared with the candidates beforehand. During the course of the forum, I may ask a candidate for a follow-up question in hopes of getting a clear understanding of his or her stance. A candidate may also be granted time to respond or to rebut an answer from a previous question. We ask you, the audience, to refrain from expressing your support or opposition to a candidate by applause or making noise during the forum. And now let me introduce the candidates. To my left is Stephen Wilson, who lives in Jefferson City. He works as a fine artist in a number of media, primarily with online sales. He's also sold medical devices and worked in international trade and in construction. He's the Libertarian candidate for the seat. In the center is Mike Bernsketter, who lives in Cole County. He's currently the House District 59 representative, having served 8 years. He's also the owner of Arts Pest Control and is a Republican candidate for the seat. To my right is Nicole Thompson, who lives in Jefferson City. She's the owner of a consulting business specializing in occupational safety and health. Previously, she worked 9 years in the Missouri Department of Labor. She's the Democratic candidate for the seat. The order for the opening and closing statements were determined beforehand by drawing of lots. Stephen will begin, and each candidate will be given 1 minute for their opening statement. So, Stephen, you may begin.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to say on behalf of the Libertarian Party that we are grateful for the inclusion from the News Tribune in this forum. Politics is a market for solutions. And my campaign is about common sense solutions to the problems that are going to affect Missouri and America in the coming years. More specifically, I am promoting Made in Missouri that deals with industrial hemp market device. I am going to try to promote a full business model for industrial hemp and full cannabis reform for the state of Missouri that will allow us to become fully operational and rank in the top 5 in about 5 to 7 years. My campaign is also promoting education reform, and I'm also dealing with tax reform. And just for those of you that have not gotten the message, taxation is theft. Thank you.
All right, Mike?
Thank you, Gary. I also want to thank the News Tribune and the city for allowing us to use the chambers, and thank everybody for coming this evening. Gary told most of my story, but my name is Mike Bernskeder. I've lived here in Cole County my whole life. I've been married to my beautiful wife, Jeanette, for 38 years. We own Arts Pest Control together. We have 4 children, 6 grandchildren, and like you said, I've been a state rep for the last 8 years. Thank you.
All right, Nicole?
Hi, my name is Nicole Thompson. I am running on a platform for more open, honest, and responsive government. I did work for the state for 9 years. Prior to that, I grew up on a cattle farm in rural Johnson County, Missouri. I went to the University of Central Missouri, got my degree in occupational safety and health before I married my high school sweetheart, and we moved here to Jefferson City, where I took that job with the state. I've since started my own business, and like I said, doing that work for the state really led me to wanting to run and seeing what more I could do to try to improve the lives of rural Missourians in our state. So I'm glad that you all came out to listen to this forum and participate in this session. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so let's get started. I will remind them, the candidates, you have 2 minutes for your responses. We'll start this first question with Mike. Proposition D is on the November 6th ballot, seeking an increase in the state's fuels tax to fund roads and bridges. Do you support it? If so, why? And is it enough to address the issue? If you oppose it, why, and what would be a better option?
Well, as the state representative, I actually voted to put Prop D on the ballot, so I am in favor of it. I think, MoDOT's done a great job in trying to reduce their costs as they've tightened their belt. I think that the 10 cents will go a long way when fully implemented into helping our roads and bridge systems, but we won't know until, it's fully implemented if it will be enough. The people have, we tried a 3/4% sales tax here a while back, and the people weren't interested in that, but hopefully they will support the gas tax.
All right, Nicole, same question.
I will be voting yes on Prop D. This is one that took me a while to kind of come to that conclusion. I've heard a lot of concerns regarding it. Some of it has been resolved for me, and that's, the way that the funding is being allocated to, for instance, the Highway Patrol, is that a lot of that funding is already coming out of MoDOT's budget. And I have a lot of, I have some friends in the department that do support it, which is partly why I've come around to this particular proposal. I do think that we will probably need to do more in the future. The roads are certainly a concern, but we're going to need to find more sources of revenue for other infrastructure projects. But along with that, I know there's the concerns, particularly for people in our rural communities, about the long drives and how those funds would be allocated. And on those issues, What I've come to believe is that a better road structure will help in reducing maintenance and wear and tear on vehicles, which will hopefully over time not cost the citizens in those communities as much. And also that I believe that the funding has been stated that it's going to be proportioned out appropriately between our urban and rural centers. So for me, I have come to the conclusion that I am supporting that, but I think that we're going to have to look additionally at some other mileage-based fee systems in the future to focus on things like energy efficiency in vehicles. That's going to kind of reduce that amount over time, and then other sources of revenue for other infrastructure projects.
All right, thank you. Stephen?
I will oppose Proposition D. The reasoning for it is that in the state of Missouri, we already pay 17 cents per gallon in taxation. And we also pay 18 cents and 24 cents respectively from the federal government. In the state of Missouri, we also have what's called transportation development districts that have the legal capacity to come up with a 1% sales tax in their specific geographic domain. Instead of raising the taxes, what I would suggest, if the people of Missouri want to make an investment in the infrastructure, I would like to see Interstate 70 and Interstate 44 become tollways. I would like to see them become 3-lane, and I would also like to see a speed rail from St. Louis to Columbia to Kansas City that would be able to carry person and package, where people looking to invest in, let's say, freight, or people interested in trying to connect the major two cities would be able to do so in a timely fashion. Thank you.
So as a follow-up question, though, the speed rails, would they be funded by state government, private enterprise?
No, they would be funded by the people that would be using them.
Okay. All right. Next question. This comes from reader Sue Gibson. Nicole will start this question. Actually, Sue Gibson and Bob Haslag asked the same question. Do you believe the August vote against Prop A, right to work, should be respected and considered settled as per the will of the people, or that the legislature should keep trying to pass right to work legislation?
I believe that Missourians spoke resoundingly when they voted against Prop A. Missourians said that right to work was not appropriate for the state of Missouri, that we need to support our unions in this state and help keep our wages in a good place. So I do not support any proposals that would try to override Missourians' decision on Prop A and right to work.
All right, thank you. Stephen, same question.
I believe that the issue should be settled. The people of Missouri had a chance to vote, and they made their voice clear. The issue with the right to work has always been the idea about being more competitive in the market device. Half of my family is in cattle, and the other half is in construction, and my uncles operate a union shop, and my cousins operate an open shop. And the main issue that I have with right to work is that people should not be voting on how I build my business structure, because the benefits of a union shop is that all of the things that are being dealt with in regards to becoming through the apprentice to a master, all I have to do is contact the union shop, and I know I'm going to be getting an apprentice or I'm going to be getting a master. And the problem is that during the Great Recession, thousands of men left the trades. So now we have a gap. We've got a gap of about 7 years. We have individuals in construction, and they do not have anybody to fill the roles. So I believe that unions serve a purpose in not only training quality individuals, but they also give them the capacity to maintain a very high level of output. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, same question.
I will respect the will of the voters. As I did vote for it in August, I think it's good public policy, but I will look for other opportunities to expand business in Missouri since that failed.
All right, thank you. Stephen, This next question begins with you. The Department of Corrections is facing a crisis when it comes to inmate population and the ability to hire corrections officers. What do you believe the state should do to address the issue?
Well, one solution that I would deal with is the fact that when you start dealing with the work environment in the actual American penal system, you're dealing with individuals that have committed violent crime, but you're also dealing with the institutionalization of people that have mental health issues, and they also have addiction issues. And in the few people that I've spoken with that have actually been in the corrections department, right now that department is, according to them, toxic. The male-female to prisoner ratio is something that is causing a major problem. And I believe that what needs to happen is that we need to decriminalize nonviolent acts. And the individuals that are in the corrections facility, they need to be people that have committed crimes that the people need to be defended from. And I also believe that when you look at the cost per prisoner in the state of Missouri, depending on the forecast model, you're talking about anywhere from $6,000 to $8,000 per prisoner. A little bit more for those people that are on death row. But the issue is that if you're going to make the job competitive, you have to be able to look at the market device. So you've got to be able to get that job identified as a career for the people that are applying to the job. So like I would in a private industry, I would treat it like human resources and I would make it more appealing. So the forecast model per prisoner, if I move the people with mental health issues and I remove the people with addiction issues into other facilities, basically what I would be doing is focusing the Department of Corrections on a career. So they would be able to deal with the things that the job entails.
All right. Mike, same question.
The rising prison population is a huge problem. It's bankrupting our budget. If we don't do something soon, we will have to build 2 new prisons that will probably cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000. We do need to figure out a way to keep people that haven't committed violent crimes. If they have mental health issues, we need to get them treatment. If they have drug problems, we need to get them treatment and keep those people out of prisons. But I think there's other ways of, we have different court systems. We have the juvenile courts and the drug treatment courts and the veterans courts, and all those things will help, hopefully help reduce our prison population.
All right. Nicole?
The first thing I would say as an issue in corrections is this goes back to state employee wages. We do not have the wages that we need in the state of Missouri in order to keep corrections officers, and they are therefore understaffed and working excessive overtime, which is a major part of that problem when it comes to controlling prison populations. So we need to look at state wages as well as implementing modern management practices within that department, because we've had issues with harassment between workers and other issues that have brought lawsuits about for the state that need to be corrected. In addition to those, we do need to focus on things to limit that prison population, including, ways to keep nonviolent offenders out of our prison system and work on preventative efforts in our communities, like mental health reforms and other practices, so that we're spending more of our money on prevention versus building new prisons. We want to work on keeping people out of prison and working on ways to keep people from going back to prison once they've been released. So we need to work on reform programs for getting those former prisoners jobs once they are released and reintegrated back into their communities. So I think we need to focus on a lot of those efforts that'll help us reduce that population, but we also just need to focus on making sure that we have a workforce that can handle the situation that we have in the state of Missouri.
All right, thank you. The next question comes from reader Scott Randolph, and he's broken it down into two different areas. The first, we'll start with Mike. It's addressed to you as an incumbent legislator. Then the second part of the question is a more general question that will go to the other two candidates. Scott says, you spent most of your House career on the Joint Committee on State Employee Wages, and yet state wages have remained the lowest in the nation since 2005. You were quoted as saying that every year we talked about it, and although a raise was included last year in the budget, you admitted it wasn't much. Instead, the legislature, under Senator Keough's leadership, focused on eliminating the merit system and due process protections for state employees, potentially making state employment even less attractive. If elected, what specific actions will you take and legislation will you propose or support to bring Missouri state worker pay and benefits to comparable levels with other states and employers?
Well, the main part of getting a state employee pay raises is working with the governor. It always works best if you get the governor to start, put that in his budget. So I will, if elected, I will immediately talk to the governor and his staff and see if we can't get that in the budget. The governor has stated that he's interested in helping out state employees. And then as I did last year when we got the state employee raise, I worked with the House budget and the chairman and the budget committee, and then I went over and talked to the Senate and the Senate committee and the appropriations committee in the Senate, and then I just started talking to the other state reps. I mean, it's a very tough issue. As chairman of the wage committee, like you mentioned, you know, part of the process of getting the committee set up was we had a resolution, and we had a hearing, and one of the state reps said, so if we find out that the state employees make more than they should, are they willing to take less in a salary? So that's the kind of things that some of the state reps talk about. If they don't have a huge state employee population in their district, you know, they just don't, it's hard to show them the need, but there is a need to pay the employees a good wage for the job they're doing, and I will continue to work with everybody at the Capitol to see that gets done.
So to clarify, you say the governor has said he's interested. Has he spoken to you about it, or
No.
just public
No, he
comments?
hasn't spoken to me. I've seen his comments that he thinks we need to address that issue.
Okay, thank you. Nicole, same question. Nicole and Stephen, this will be your question. If elected, what specific actions will you take and legislation will you propose or support to bring Missouri state workers' pay and benefits to comparable levels with other states and employers?
Yeah, the state employee wages are something that needs to be done, and it's getting to be an immediate problem. It's something that is always talked about as this issue that needs to be corrected, and yet something else always takes precedence over paying our state workers appropriately. We are 50th out of 50 states in terms of what we pay our state workers, and we're seeing it in turnover. We're seeing it in the issues that we have in the corrections department. And, you know, again, despite that, the legislature, instead of passing pay raises, instead passes legislation to tell state workers that they're coming after them, that their jobs aren't protected. So any security that people may have felt by maintaining their state level jobs is now gone. Benefit costs are increasing, so they're actually being paid less now than they were before. And pensions aren't what they used to be. It takes 10 years to be vested, which isn't enticing to either young people or retirees entering the state. So this is an immediate concern that we need to focus on. And, you know, to say that it's an issue of trying to convince other people in the rest of the state where they don't have the state worker population like we do in our district. I mean, the issue is that this is the foundation of the way that our government systems run. And if we want to maintain an efficient process so that businesses understand that we have a level playing field here in the state, and that all of our government programs are managed effectively when it comes to making sure that people receive their unemployment or workers' compensation benefits, or, going back to businesses, they have a lot of interactions with the state when it comes to the processes and the forms that they have to complete. And without an effective workforce, and in addition the support that the workers need in order to do their jobs effectively, then we're just not going to be able to be a competitive state.
All right, Stephen, same question.
I promote privatization in the same model that the Department of Revenue uses for the licensing of the DMV. In the 21st century, I believe that across the nation, we need to change our attitude about the idea that working for the state can actually be a career. In the same way that if I were to purchase a merger, I would go through an occupational mirror. What are you getting paid versus the person from the private sector to the public? And the idea that the wage index in the state of Missouri, in a comparison rationale, is lower than the other states in the union, you're still talking about economies of scale. And quite frankly, the people in Missouri are paying what they can afford. I wouldn't really focus in on the wage. I would focus in on the compensation package. Because when you start to look at the way that state employees have the ability to go into a public pension, like most public pensions, they're underfunded. And according to the forecast model, according to Mosier, they will not be 100% funded until the year 2046. So, like for example, in St. Louis, the teachers union, they just passed law that told their members, from now on, your contribution is going to go from 5 to 9%. So if you want to teach, your contribution has to go up. So for me, I don't think that the state wage index needs to be competitive to the market device. We need, in the 21st century, to start looking at the possibility of looking at exactly what they do and can it be done in the private sector at a cheaper rate. Thank you.
So, follow-up question, because you mentioned that in the News Tribune story in Sunday's paper, the privatization aspect there.
Yes.
Certainly there are aspects of, are you saying blanket across state government, from highway patrol to DFS to prisons to everything would be privatized?
There is a possibility that you could privatize, because when you tell me that a state employee does X1 or X2 or X3, that's still a job. So in the private sector, could that be done? Well, if it's a job being done by the public, more than likely the private market, the market itself would tell you whether or not it's necessary. So privatization could be done, but in some cases, like the Public Service Commission, when the state of Missouri allows for monopolies like Ameren, you need somebody that's going to say, look, you have to cap what you're going to pay for the utilities because they have a monopoly. And an individual, regardless of what they make, they cannot engage a monopoly. So unless the state of Missouri said, look, from now on, you're going to have to shop for your utilities, you still need people that are going to provide those, where these people would have a choice plateau. So privatization would have to begin in the areas that identify the most relatable from the public to the private sector.
Okay, I think I'm following you. Okay, let's go to the next question. It's also on state pay. How do you, and Mike made reference to this, the difficulty of convincing your other colleagues at the Capitol of the need for better compensation for state employees. How do you plan to convince lawmakers from other parts of the state that Missouri's government employees need a better pay and benefits package, and what sort of progress do you believe to be realistic next year? Let's catch up on the idea that last year it was a $700 raise much of that was taken out in benefits. Is that the kind of steps we're looking at if I'm a state employee? Or do you believe there's a more aggressive approach to right this ship? We'll start with Nicole.
I absolutely believe that we need a more aggressive approach to raising our wages in the state. It's not an issue that's been addressed despite as long as we've known that it's been an issue. And as far as convincing other legislators in the state of the issue is, I would go back again to the fact that our state, in order to have a flexible and efficient government, we need a strong workforce. And I would say as well that we are currently costing ourselves money in turnover and in management issues and in other places just because we haven't raised those salaries and we can't maintain the state workforce that we need. So I think it's an issue to say that it's not just for our district. It does go across the whole state because it affects the way that every one of us interacts with the government when we go, to do any business process that we need. So I mentioned again, workers' compensation, unemployment, any regulatory actions against businesses, they need to know that there's a common point of contact for them within each department. So I think for that, we definitely need to just focus on getting that done.
All right, Stephen?
In dealing with my colleagues in the Senate, I would not propose any kind of legislation wherein there would be an increase, again, in the wage index or the compensation for state employees. Instead of dealing with the wage, again, the first thing that I would do is that I would start dealing with the compensation. I would like to see the state of Missouri go from a defined benefit to a defined contribution. And that would be the equivalent of a 401k. So the Missouri taxpayer would be paying a fixed rate regardless of the individual's career in the state. And in regards to their own retirement, if the person chooses to work for the state as their career, they would have to make that kind of investment in the same way that I would with my own portfolio. If I want to invest $10,000 or if I want to invest $2,500, that's going to be up to me. So what's going to happen with a defined contribution is that the compensation package and its value, its future value, is going to be based on the sole responsibility of the state worker. Thank you.
Mike?
As a small business owner, I understand the cost of hiring employees and training employees and what happens if they leave after you've trained them. And so the same thing's happening in state government. We're training employees and they're leaving. But I also understand as a small business owner that healthcare costs have went up over the last several years, and in the budget process, we've been able to keep the healthcare costs fairly flat until this year. So the healthcare costs have been down for state employees. We've invested more in the retirement fund, and we got a modest increase this year, and I will continue to work with the senators and the state reps and the governor to make sure we get an increase in the wages again next year.
All right, let's go to our next question. This one will begin with Stephen. Reader Michael Lester asks this question: do you support Amendment 1, the Clean Missouri Constitutional Initiative? Explain why or why not. And does its presence on the ballot indicate a failure of the legislature to adequately regulate their own ethical behavior?
I do not support Clean Missouri. In my experience dealing with different states around the country, this kind of legislation is basically a Hail Mary pass by the voter. They're basically indicating to the body politic that the quality of their candidates is not as where they expect them to be, and they are not able to actually trust them. The people that they're voting for are not actually behaving with integrity. The Clean Missouri Act starts dealing with the concept of a glass house. They start dealing with the lobbyists, and they start dealing with the kinds of backdoor deals that take place. Well, if you vote for someone and they tell you that they're going to make public domain, like for myself, I've told people that my office hours are going to be Monday through Friday, 9 to 6. My schedule is going to be public domain on the website. And those are the kinds of things that people need to understand, that when you vote for someone as a public servant, they have to be approachable. Now, the final thing that we deal with in regards to the Clean Missouri Act is gerrymandering. And according to the Clean Missouri Act, another third party, an angel, comes in, and we're going to pretend that theoretically this person doesn't have an agenda, is going to come in and decide what a district is, but they're going to have to engage the question, what is fair, and fair to whom? According to the Secretary of State, there are 5 political parties. So you've got people in the state of Missouri that are going to have to be approached by this person, and they're going to have to answer the question, what role is government going to play in your life? Instead of talking about the effect, you have to talk about the cause. I would recommend going with mixed member proportional as a voting method. Thank you.
Mike?
Terrible, Amendment 1's a terrible idea. There's a lot of different issues in the amendment, so I think it's going to be hard for people to pick out the bad parts, but they're just trying to obfuscate the issue, and they're taking a partisan, there's a bipartisan solution to the drawing the districts now. Either 70% of the committee has to vote in favor of this, or if you can't get 70% on the issue, then it goes to the judges, which is what happened last time. The judges drew the districts. And so now they're turning it into a completely partisan issue where one person, the state auditor, is in charge of picking the state demographer. And so it takes a bipartisan or nonpartisan issue and turns it into a completely partisan issue. So I'm not in favor of Amendment 1.
All right, Nicole?
I do support Amendment 1, Clean Missouri. I think those types of ethics reforms are strongly needed in the state of Missouri, and it goes a long way to my platform for more open, honest, and responsive government in Missouri. You asked if it's a voter response to a failure in the legislature to kind of pass their own reforms, and I believe that it is. This was a voter-supported ballot measure, and I would say that it's not about a bunch of different issues. It is specifically about ethics reform in our legislature and making that a more clear and honest process. And I'd say that this does go a long way to that. I think that there will be more reforms that are needed after it, but to say that we're taking, gerrymandering and saying that it's currently not a partisan issue, that's just not true. We know that the way that our districts are currently drawn, not just partisan, but specifically the people in office, can kind of draw their boundaries around themselves. We know of cases of legislators in districts being drawn out of their own boundary, out of their own districts. So I think there's a lot of good policy within there, including, the need to be more, open records with the type of legislation that we're passing. So I do support Clean Missouri, and I am promoting that.
Okay, so a couple follow-up questions on this. I'll start with Nicole. So you make reference to legislators who had basically drawn their own districts. Do you have specific examples of that?
I'm sorry, I don't. I mean, I do like to point out, just because I know it's people that I talk to, but, you have these tiny communities like Marceline, Missouri, where, it's a tiny little town, and the way that the districts are drawn, they split it into thirds. It confuses voters in that town. as to who their representatives are. And I think it's important that we find a way to draw these boundaries so that communities are together, and that we support more of that, concept of a one person, one vote, and that we're not weighing things, in favor of one group over another.
Okay. So to Stephen and to Mike, both of you are opposed to Clean Missouri. Many would argue the purposes, while certainly the gerrymandering aspect of it certainly was an added part of this proposition, the underlying cause was the belief that there needed to be more transparency in who's paying, who's contributing to candidates, who's got their voice. So if you think Clean Missouri is a bad idea, how would you address campaign finance and ethical concerns that voters do have about the legislature? So start with Stephen.
In regards to transparency, I believe that should be up to the individual that you voted for. I basically told people that you're going to know everything that I'm going to be doing and who I'm seeing. So the idea that you need a law telling people how to behave is indicative to the idea that what they said during the campaign is just not coming to fruition when they get into office. And that's the real problem with legislation like this. Missouri is not the first one to come up with this. But the problem is that if you're talking about gerrymandering, if you're talking about transparency, you're talking about the effect. You need to address the cause. And if you're going to have corrupt people in the system, having these kinds of checks and balances are not going to make a difference. You need to vote people that are willing to give you a glass house.
Okay, I guess my follow-up question to you would be then, why do we have traffic laws that say there are speed limits? We don't need police running radar because the sign clearly says 30 miles an hour. So why wouldn't there need to be some sort of regulations to address campaign finance issues, ethical issues?
Well, in regards to speed limits, there are people that don't obey the speed limits and they don't get into wrecks. I mean, they might get pulled over, but they're going to be ticketed for going over that speed limit sign. But you're still trying to say, I'm going to protect you from you. That's what you're telling me when you have a speed limit sign on the road. You're still saying, I'm going to protect you from you. You could have gone 40, you could have gone 42, but you needed to go 30. But the fact is, I went 45 and I didn't wreck. I didn't bother anybody. But here, when you're talking about campaign transparency, you people as the voter, that's your due diligence. If you're just going to go through the procedure and say, I'm going to vote Republican, or I'm going to vote Democrat, or I'm going to vote Green, then that's what you deserve. If you're not going to do your due diligence as a voter, you make the bed you got to sleep in.
Mike?
Well, I'd like to address what Nicole said about gerrymandering. It was judges that drew these districts. You know, she was talking about, was it Marceline? Marceline. So, like my first 2 years in the House, I had the eastern half of Cole County. That was it. And then after that, they redrew the lines. So I got most of the rural part of Cole County and a little bit of Miller County. So the people in Miller County were upset because I had part of Miller County, another guy had part of Miller County, another guy had part of Miller County, and there was 4 people that had part of Miller County. In Cole County, there's 5 people that touch Cole County. Those lines were drawn by judges. And with the way they want to do the Clean Missouri is they're going to take, they want it to be a 50, the best way I can describe it is a 50% Republican, 50% Democrat. And like Stephen said, what are they doing with the Libertarians? So, I mean, they're going to have to come from Boone County down to Osage County and draw just like a thin little line down there to make it a 50-50 district. So if anything's going to be gerrymandered, it's going to be the way it's done now if they want to make them 50-50 districts. People want compact, concise districts with common interests, and that's what people want. They want to be close to their state rep, They want to be able to see them at the grocery store and at church and at picnics, and I don't think Clean Missouri will do that. I think it will just, it'll drag people from Boone County. Either they'll have a representative from Osage County or from Boone County that represents part of Osage County, or they'll come from St. Charles and they'll pick up part of Gasconade County. I just don't think it's a good idea. Does that answer your question?
No. So we're going to circle back, but I appreciate your response.
Okay.
How do you address the issue, the voters' perception that there needs to be better controls on campaign finance and ethics out of the state legislature? If you don't like Clean Missouri, what is your alternative that you would offer?
Well, I think, like Stephen said, you have to elect ethical people. We've had problems over at the House and the Senate in the past. I was a member of the leadership team with the Speaker, Todd Richardson. We tried to clean up if there is an ethics problem, we ask people to resign, but it goes back to what Stephen said, you got to elect ethical people. You have to know who you're voting for. I don't even know if that answers your question or not. I mean, I voted for not campaign finance limits. I voted for the revolving door ban, where you can't be, a state rep can't turn around and be a lobbyist. I voted for lobbyist gift bans. I mean, we've done a lot of things to try to be, like I said, I think it comes back to voting and electing ethical people, but we've done a lot on that front, but it never has passed through the Senate. And as a senator, I will still work to try to do away with the revolving door and the lobbyist gift ban.
All right, thank you. All right, next question. We'll start with Mike. Reader Melissa Hollingshead-Wampler asks, firearms are the second leading cause of death for American children and teens, and with the rise in gun violence in schools, what commitments and tangible actions will you take if elected to prevent gun violence in our community? She lists such as background checks on all gun purchases, laws that keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people, keeping guns out of sensitive places, and ensuring guns are locked and stored out of reach of children.
Okay, so we've done a lot in the area of mental health and awareness to mental health. I think that goes a long way. I think we need to do more as far as if we need to get more resource officers into the buildings, if we need to do more work with the school districts and do security upgrades. I think the best thing we can do is to make it to where a bad person with a gun knows they're not welcome in a school. I just think whatever we can do to protect our kids is very important.
All right, Nicole?
Well, to go into my background a little bit too, as a workplace safety and health professional, one thing that, I have worked with businesses on their workplace violence prevention plans. And something as a safety professional that we think about is that in the workplace, we consider all deaths are preventable. And, it's not to say that, you really can stop every one, but to say that, through that perspective, we are able to limit the types of incidents that happen in our workplaces. And so I would say that from that perspective, as a safety and health professional, I would take that into the legislature and I would focus on our gun violence issues in Missouri as a public health issue. And, one thing that we do, in workplaces is we say, we focus on, say, like de-escalation techniques with frontline service workers. In healthcare, it's about recognizing difficult patients and having procedures in place. In late-night retail establishments, it's about physical security and lighting. So there's a lot of community things that we can do to take these kinds of practices into the community and a much broader scale. So I would want to look at the research on that and focus on those types of issues. In addition, I do support some controls like expanding background checks to make sure that they are universal and that they cover everyone in the state of Missouri who is going to purchase a gun.
All right, thank you. Stephen?
My own personal take on gun law is that the empirical data has proven that gun laws do not actually keep people safe. If a person wants to use a gun, they're going to be able to find a gun. Some cities are worse than others, but the fact is that gun law does not prevent gun violence. Now, the two things that I use for my own personal life is, number one, when I started deer hunting, my father trained me to use different kinds of rifles and a handgun. But my father had been 187th Rakkasan Airborne, and he was military police in Korea. He had been in combat for a year and a half. So he respected firearms from the point of actually killing people in battle. And even though we were hunting deer, I had to go through, his training, and then I went through a safety course that dealt with cleaning the gun, putting the gun away, the concept of having the gun in one location and the ammunition in another. The second example that I would like to use is that two of the corporations that I have worked for in the past, we actually paid security in our building. We had professional people at the doors that had the capacity to go through metal detection, and so those individuals were a first line of defense. So we had our own security force, and that was part of our fixed operating cost. And in regards to the safety of Missouri children, I would like to see that being done in schools, and that should be done by the people that are in those schools. Thank you.
All right, thank you. This one will start with Nicole from Reader Stan Cowan. Tobacco companies are fighting to weaken and delay court-ordered corrective actions. In Missouri, tobacco interests have hired many registered lobbyists to discourage legislation that would result in fewer people using tobacco. Given this information, would you, 1, pledge to not accept campaign contributions from tobacco and e-cigarette companies or organizations promoting these products, and 2, support tobacco control legislation endorsed by the American Cancer Society, American Heart Association, and American Lung Association?
Well, I'll first say there aren't any tobacco companies that are going to be offering me any money. But, to say that I do support efforts to reduce tobacco use in the state of Missouri, and I would be interested in looking at some of that legislation.
All right, thank you. Stephen?
The way that I would address that issue is that being a libertarian, we normally don't get any money from anybody. So I don't think that the tobacco companies would be at my door as a state senator. So I don't think you would have to be worried about that. Now, in regards to dealing with the market device, the federal government has already tried to use taxation by vice, and especially dealing with the youth, to keep them away from tobacco, making it more difficult to obtain because of the cost. In some states like New York and Michigan, you can pay anywhere from $7 to $12 for a pack of cigarettes. Most teenagers don't have that kind of money to waste unless they're doing something else with their money. So I do not believe that there should be any kind of legislation to restrict access. If people want to smoke, that's up to them. Thank you.
All right. Mike?
There's all kinds of awareness programs about the use of tobacco and the harms of tobacco. I mean, it's all over the TV, the newspaper, the radio, and it's on all the packages. It's a legal substance. If people want to use it, I'd say let them use it.
All right. Would you pledge to not accept campaign contributions, or you would take contributions?
I would take contributions. I have taken contributions from tobacco companies. Like I said, it's a legal substance.
Okay.
As long as it's legal,
All right.
people want to use it.
Next question starts with Steve. Reader Jane Lester asks, how would you cross the partisan divide to represent all Missouri citizens? In a year from now, what do you hope to have achieved in your first year as a legislator? And I would add, what would be the first bill that you would file if elected to this position?
Well, going from the last one, the first legislation that I would try to get through committee and onto the floor would be a full reprieve of the industrial hemp bill that's signed by Governor Greitens. Right now, in the United States of America, there are 40 states that currently have passed legislation for industrial hemp, and we don't need another pilot program for industrial hemp. The entry into industrial hemp is now closing. So I'm trying to promote Made in Missouri, and I know that industrial hemp can not only create jobs, but it's going to improve the quality of life index. So that's going to be the first thing that I would do. And what were the others?
How would you cross the partisan divide, and what do you hope to achieve in your first year?
The thing that I would like to achieve along with industrial hemp is I would like to begin a conversation about education reform and mental health reform. I am a board member on NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and the Carl DeBrody case is made the state of Missouri into a national joke. And I know that recently the civil lawsuit has actually dismissed the individuals working in the Department of Health and the individuals that had access to him through guardianship or through the courts. And that to me is something that is absolutely unforgivable. I try to explain to people that if Carl were your brother, there is no way that you would just sit there and let him be treated that way. The idea they had a guardian and the rest of it, I mean, I'm not going to go on a rant here, but I just want to say with NAMI, it's something that really hit home, and that's something that I would like to deal with in the first year.
All right, thank you. Mike, same question. How would you cross the partisan divide? A year from now, what do you hope to have achieved? And what will be the first bill you'll file as a legislator?
Well, I have, in the last 8 years, I have crossed the partisan divide. You know, we have worked, the House and the Senate have worked together, the Republicans and Democrats have worked together. That's an easy one. There'd probably be something on the economic development field. There's a lot of, well, if the gas tax passes, I think there's a lot of things we can do on the economic development field. There's some tort reform issues that we've been dealing with. Hopefully clear some of those things up, and I'd also like to work to make online realtors or retailers and the brick and mortars on more of a level playing field.
Can you expand on that last one a bit?
Well, you have they're not being taxed like the regular brick and mortars are, so some kind of to make them on more of a level playing field. I don't have anything specific.
But the idea of taxing the online retailers to
make them more on a level playing field, yes.
Okay. All right. Nicole?
You know, to kind of address one of the first things that I think needs done is that our state revenues are kind of in crisis levels, and I don't think we can really do any of the other things that we need to do, like raise state worker pay and improve our infrastructure and make sure that we can provide quality public education in the state of Missouri until we look at what's been done with our corporate revenue tax system. So I'd say that that's important, but I understand that you're also asking about bipartisan issues here and things that I think that I would be able to accomplish within my first year. And I'd say, you know, a personal issue for me and something that I noticed when I worked in the state is that in the state of Missouri, currently, there are no safety and health protections in place for government workers in our state. They're not covered by the federal OSHA Act. And so I would hope that it would be a bipartisan issue to say that we need to bring our state in government into the same level that we expect of private employers in our state and extend those kinds of safety and health protections. I know from a veterinarian that's running for the House in Missouri as well that our rabies statutes are outdated. I know that we have a lot of levees that need inspected. So I'd say that there's a lot of, like public safety and health issues that we can look at that I would hope that I would be able to get support for, and I'd like to accomplish a lot of those things in the legislature.
All right. Next question comes from Reader Jan Schumacher. What is your position, Mike, on providing greater support for energy efficiency by mandating that all utilities have an energy efficiency programs for their industrial, commercial, and residential customers? What's your position on the state offering rebates for installation of solar?
So, they have had rebates for solar. I don't really know that the state needs to get involved in that. I think whatever utility you want to use, if the utility company wants to use coal or nuclear or whatever, whatever's cheapest, I think that's what the people want, is the safe, reliable, whatever's the least expensive form of electricity.
All right, Nicole?
I would support efforts to try to improve increase the amount of sustainable energy that we use in the state of Missouri. I think instead of just looking at what's the cheapest option now, we need to be focusing on future-proofing our state and making sure that we're ready for the next step of advancement and productivity in our state. And I think that we need a solid energy source to do that. So I think that we do need to look at some of those initiatives.
All right, Stephen?
The first thing that needs to be addressed is that the tariffs that the president hit on China is going to affect the cost index for solar panels. As a libertarian, it's something that people often talk about across different states, but especially in the Southwest, about living off the grid. And the fact is that the market device is, the more that it innovates, the product is inevitably going to become more cost efficient to purchase. So if you wish to go solar, it's going to be more, more attainable because there's going to be more competition. The tariff, and as a state senator, there's nothing I could do about the federal, but the tariff that came from China affected the price index for solar panels. And for people that want to go off the grid, it's going to be more and more cost prohibitive because of trying to get access to that. Because in America, we don't have a lot of people manufacturing solar panels. And in regard to your question about, what the state can do with rebates, if somebody wants to live off the grid, that really needs to be addressed by the Public Service Commission, because they're the ones that are going to be controlling the monopoly for the utilities. And I would like to see the Public Service Commission basically telling Ameren and the other providers that it's not really your job to tell people to do one thing or the other. The Missouri citizen should have the ability to choose if they want to go off the grid. Thank you.
All right. At this point, I think we'll begin our closing statements. So we'll start with Stephen. You have 1 minute for your closing statement.
In the 21st century, the world is not going to suffer fools. We cannot live in chamber, and we cannot live in fantasy land. And the problem with the major two parties is that they believe that the traditions of public service are going to maintain the United States of America into the future. But the fact is that we need hard choices made with people that have experience and intellect and vision. So, as a libertarian, I will never tell you what to do, but in November, just choose wisely. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike?
I want to thank the News Tribune again. I want to thank the city for allowing us to use the beautiful room. I want to thank everybody that came out this evening and is interested in the process. As a state rep for the last 8 years, I've worked to lessen the burdens on small business. I've worked to keep government from overreaching into our lives every day. I think I have the community experience, the business experience, I have agricultural experience, and I have legislative experience, and I'm asking for everybody's support, and like I said, I appreciate everybody coming out tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Nicole?
Well, I want to thank you all for coming out and listening to the forums and our responses, and thank the Tribune for hosting. I'd like to say that I think the difference here in our philosophy is that I believe that our democratic system of government can be used to build our communities, and that we can work together to solve some of the problems that we have. So, like I said, I am promoting a more open, honest, and responsive government, because I think that, if we're clear and if we're honest in our intentions and straightforward, that we can create positive legislation that can help bring our communities together and improve the economic situation for us here in Middle Missouri. So thank you again for having me out.
Thank you. I do thank all three candidates for appearing tonight, answering the questions. I would encourage all those in the chamber tonight, as well as listening online or by TV, to get out and vote on November 6th. It's an important election that's coming up, and I will tell you that we also have opportunities in the News Tribune where we'll be asking further questions of the candidates. You may certainly submit your questions to us at vote@newstribune.com, and we will be asking the candidates to respond. And as always, I thank you for your willingness to answer the questions to the best of your ability, and thank you again.
Thanks, Gary.
So we'll take about a 5-minute break, and then we'll resume with the District 60 House race.
Michael's actually the mayor here. I was going to come out and tell him that we should take a selfie.
Yeah.
We may need some more water. Yeah, those guys excuse me.
I'm good. Nope, I'm good.
We may be on here.
Thank you.
So we're going to get started with our second part of the forum. I want to welcome you to the House District 60 Forum. Prior to tonight, much like the first forum, I'll go through some of the rules. The candidates were advised the rules of the forum. They will have opening statements, respond to questions, and then have a closing statement. Let's see. So let's just jump right into it. It gives us more time for questions. So let me introduce the candidates for tonight's forum. So on my left is Dave Griffith. He lives in Jefferson City, is a veteran, is retired, but previously worked in the home mortgage and insurance business and in communications. He spent 2 stints with KRCG. He served as a twice-elected 5th Ward councilman in Jefferson City. He then moved on to be executive director of the American Red Cross of Central and Northern Missouri. He's the Republican candidate for the seat. To my right is Sarah Michael, who lives in Jefferson City. She's a family attorney with Carver and Michael LLC in Jefferson City. She's the Democratic candidate for the seat. So we drew lots beforehand. Dave drew the first lot, so he will start with his opening statement. He'll have 1 minute. So Dave?
All right, thank you, and I thank all of you for coming out here this evening and being a part of this, and for all those that are streaming this online, I want to thank you for tuning in as well. I am Dave Griffith. I'm the Republican candidate for the 60th District. My wife and I have lived in Jefferson City for the last 30-plus years. We've raised both of our children here. They both graduated from Jefferson City High School. I have been raised in a family of service. My dad and mom taught us that service to our fellow man is what God calls us to do every single day. And over my lifetime, I have served as a volunteer for when I was in my teens, to serving my country with the 8th Special Forces Group during the Vietnam War era, to the number of different not-for-profit organizations that I volunteered with over the years. And then probably in my last time with the Red Cross, I was deployed 5 times with them, and so service is what I'll bring to the House of Representatives.
Thank you, Dave. Sarah?
Good evening. I would like to thank everybody for coming out and sticking around, and those of you online, I can imagine you may be watching us plus others, but I appreciate all the attention that we're getting this evening. Thanks to the News Tribune for everything you've done. I am Sarah Michael. I am the Democratic candidate for the 60th House. I've lived and worked and raised my kids in Jeff for over 22 years. 18 years of those I've been a small business owner. I am currently a small business owner, managing a law firm here in town with my partner, Galen Carver. As they mentioned, I practice family law, which has given me the opportunity to work and be on the ground with families every day, knowing exactly how the government can help them and can hurt them with their policies. I'm a member of the St. Peter Parish here in Jeff, and tonight I can say that I'm a proud mother of 2 teenagers. Sometimes I'm just a mother of 2 teenagers.
All right, thank you. All right, so we'll start with our questions. Dave, we'll start with you. What issues do constituents in District 60 tell you they are concerned by, and how might you address those concerns?
I think that my wife and I have knocked over 7,000 doors since we began this campaign back in March. And one of the things that resonates with me and with a lot of the voters that I talk with are their concerns about those that are state employees, about their pay. Many of them are concerned about their health care. They're concerned about taxes. And I think that one of the things that, as a representative, that I want to be able to do, and that is to listen to my constituents. I've given every one of the people I've talked with my personal cell phone number, and my email address, and have encouraged them to reach out to me if they've got issues that they want to talk about. If I'm elected, one of the things that I want to be able to do is to be responsive to their needs. I know that when Joe interviewed me not long ago, before the primary, he said, this is going to be a part-time job for you. And I told him, and I'll tell you, that this is not going to be a part-time job. For me, this is going to be a full-time job. And I want to have town meetings. I want to be able to hold coffees with folks, to be able to sit down and talk with them, and let them know that indeed that they can reach out to me, they can talk with me, and that I will be responsive to their needs. Many times that some of the issues that we're going to vote on, I may vote in ways that they don't agree with, but as I served on the city council, and I had people that would, constituents in the 5th Ward that would tell me the way they wanted, and if I voted the opposite way, I was able to tell them why I voted that way. And I intend to do the same thing when I'm elected to this office.
All right, thank you. Sarah?
I can imagine there are opportunities where Dave and I are talking to different groups of people, but I would agree that definitely the top topic that comes up when I'm discussing fears, concerns, the needs of people both within my practice and in the public at large is this current status of Missouri's state employees and their pay, their benefits, the cost of the benefits, the attacks against the merit system. We are a company town, and so by and large, we have a larger population of state employees here, and that is a number one focus of because everyone is affected one way or another by state wages, either someone within their family is a state employee, their parents, their siblings, cousins, close friends, everyone has some touch to the state government here in Jeff. So that is the number one thing that people talk to me about after August 7th. Before August 7th, the issue was right to work, and people brought that up to me at every place that I went. It was a fundamental issue for so many people here locally, and they are passionate, and I believe in them, and I believe in what the opposition to Prop A brought to the table, and it was soundly defeated within my district. And those two issues are definitely the top issues. Other issues that people talk to me about are school safety and our education system, the education funding formula that has been tinkered with to such a degree that it's basically been eroded within the legislature, and our schools aren't getting the needs and resources that they should be, that our tax dollars are supposed to be contributing to. And so that's a concern. When people talk to me about their health care, but they really talk to me about the fundamentals of their family, meaning how do we support our family, how do we feed our family, and how do we educate our children? And those are the issues that I hear about the most.
All right, thank you. Sarah, Michael Lester, a reader, asks, in what way would you better represent the people of your district than your opponent?
I think that I have committed my campaign to the idea that I am doing this to not only hear the concerns of my constituents, but also act in ways that are actually in their best interest and not in the best interest of special interests or what has been the policy of the supermajority for the last 20 years. I mean, I know it hasn't been a supermajority for the last 20 years, but for the last few sessions. That instead of putting forth or supporting legislation that serves the few, my goal is to serve the many. And I think if you talk to those people that live within the 60th, they're with me on that they truly do want the government to work for them, not donate or dole out, but to work for them, to develop policies or not put policies in place that actually help them in their everyday lives. I think that my position and my approach to what type of legislation is necessary to make lives better is different than what has been going on in the past few sessions. And I'm afraid that if there isn't a change within the 60th as to the representation, that we will just see more of the same.
Dave?
Okay. Well, I've only known Sarah just for a few months, so I don't know exactly how I would do things better than her, but I can tell you that the supermajority that Sarah has referred to a number of times really is representative of what the people in the state of Missouri want. They want people with integrity. They want people with conviction. They want people that care about what goes on in their daily lives. And that's what Republicans have done for the last few sessions, and they have spoke resoundingly that they appreciate that type of government. What I feel like I can do, and if just bring my own self to this, is to be able to collaborate and to build relationships with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. I spent the last 6 years with the American Red Cross, and I was deployed 5 times with them. And each one of those deployments was larger than what any one organization could handle. And it took collaboration between the Red Cross and the Salvation Army and Catholic Charities and Lutheran Services and any number of organizations to be able to bring service delivery to those that need it. And that's what I want to be able to do as your next representative, is to be able to collaborate with my colleagues, to be able to collaborate with those across the aisle, and to be able to get things done. And one of my strong suits is really in building a relationship with folks. And that's what I want to be able to take with me to the House of Representatives.
All right. Dave, we'll ask this question of you first. Lawmakers have said they're worried about the state of health care in Missouri. To improve services for some of the state's most underserved populations, lawmakers have eased rules and regulations on telehealth and use of nurse practitioners as primary care providers. Yet, Missouri remains among the most restrictive states in both categories. Would you support further easing of regulations on both? Why or why not?
Well, I think that St. Mary's just here recently laid out what their telehealth was going to do in being able to provide medical services to those that are in rural areas. And I think it's a new technology that is being used. I think there are a lot of concerns as far as HIPAA goes as to how that's going to be addressed. One of the big issues that we've got with healthcare right now are premiums. The premiums for healthcare for Missourians across the state have just risen to the point where many are having to make a choice of whether they're going to pay their mortgage or pay their insurance. And there are ways that could be fixed on that as far as the health savings accounts. Those have been limited to $7,600. And if we were to be able to raise that amount to a higher number, and to be able to ease some of the restrictions that we have on those HROs, then where they can use those for over-the-counter medicines as well as for prescription medicines, I think that would be a big need. The other concern I have as far as hospitals go are rural hospitals. Our rural hospitals slowly are going away. And what's going to end up happening is we're going to be seeing more regional hospitals around the state of Missouri, whether it be in Kansas City, St. Louis, or Columbia. Fortunately, we've got great health care here in Jefferson City, and being able to maintain those. But when I look at some smaller communities that have had their own hospital in their town for as long as they can remember, their kids were born in those hospitals. And because of the health care cost and because of the malpractice insurance that many doctors are having to pay, they're having to make some really hard decisions as to whether they're going to maintain their own unanimity or they're going to be absorbed by other larger hospitals.
Sarah?
I would support easing some restrictions and making alternative treatment options available to more rural communities, like allowing nurse practitioners to serve in a greater capacity. And telehealth, I think any use of technology that would benefit the individual would be to the benefit of the individual would be a good idea. The concerns with regard to HIPAA would stem from the idea that someone would hack your communications, because it's a one-on-one communication with the physician that and you have a doctor-patient relationship simply because it's online and you're doing it like over the phone doesn't change that requirement for the individual, for the practitioner in the distribution of information. I agree that our rural hospitals are dying. I don't agree that it's due to malpractice insurance premiums or the community at large. It's the failure of the state of Missouri to expand Medicaid. These hospitals aren't getting paid for the services that they're providing to the individuals that cannot maintain insurance. Deepening the health savings accounts is a great opportunity and a great plan for people that can afford to contribute to a health savings account. When you don't have the money to save back and you need to buy milk and bread instead, you're not going to contribute to a health savings account and then thereby minimize your medical expenses that may be occurring in the future. When you're living for today and not for next year, it's very difficult to make that type of choice with whether or not your kids get shoes. So expanding Missouri's Medicaid program is what I think would be the first life rope to the rural communities with regard to health care. There are a lot of individuals that would happily go back home and work at their local hospital and live among family and in local communities, smaller communities. But those medical facilities cannot survive if they're not getting paid for the services that they're providing.
Okay, so we're going to stay on this subject for a minute. I'm going to start with Sarah first, and you have a minute to expand a little bit farther. You've mentioned there's a supermajority over there that does not like Medicaid expansion. So how do we addressing the needs of the underserved population, the healthcare needs of the underserved population, in light of a climate there that does not appear to be supportive of Medicaid expansion?
Well, the very pessimistic answer to that is that you cannot address it, because there is an attitude over there with a supermajority that won't allow you to broach into an alternative approach than what they've been putting forth and has not been solving the problem to date. So the first solution is to even the playing field. We need to have true bipartisan communication. The idea that you hear that those in the supermajority will work across the aisle, they don't have to. So, and they haven't, based on the communication that I've received and the information that I've gotten from others that have served on my side of the aisle in the House, as well as some of the legislative assistants that serve up there. So that would be the first problem. So if you, it seems like an obvious fix to the problem, but because it isn't being supported by those that make a profit off of this circumstance, it's not getting addressed within the legislature, and I don't know how to fix that.
Dave, so follow-up question to you would be, do you support Medicaid expansion? And if not, what alternatives would you offer to address meeting the needs, the health needs of the underserved population?
Under the current Medicaid system that we got right now, it's broken. It is not working. And the question that I would have is, where are we going to get the money? How are we going to pay for it? That's we have a lot of good programs that are being promoted and that people want to expand on, but it's going to take money in order to be able to do that. And I think that individual communities can step up to try and provide some kind of assistance to those that are the underserved. We look at the Samaritan Center here in Jefferson City, in the services that they are able to offer, that are volunteers that are providing those services. Doctors and nurses and dentists and folks like that are going in there and providing those kind of services. I just don't, I can't see us putting money, I just don't see where we're going to get the money to pay for Medicare expansion. And I would disagree that I think that bipartisan efforts can be done by those that are willing to do them.
All right, Dave, this question will start with you. A year from now, what do you hope to have achieved in your first year as a legislator, and what would the first bill be that you filed if elected to this position?
What I would hope to accomplish a year from now is to feel like I can look back on this particular year and feel like it was a success, that I was able to make a difference in the House of Representatives, that I was able to represent the people of the 60th District honorably, and to be able to look at them and tell them what we had done. As far as the first bill that I would introduce, that would be that we would expand veterans courts throughout the entire state of Missouri. When I was deployed to Texas last year, I was able to work with the judges that have in the state of Texas. Every county in the state of Texas has a veterans court. And veterans, when they have been downrange, when they come back from battle, they are different people. And being able to address the situations that they are, because they make decisions that they wouldn't have made before they went to battle. And yet they're still thrown into the same system as all criminals. And we need to be able to separate them from where they are and to be able to treat them. And we've got veterans courts here in Jefferson City. We've got them in Columbia, St. Louis, Kansas City, Springfield, Cape Girardeau, Joplin. We've got them in all those. But smaller rural Missouri does not have them. And It's going to take a nasty word in the House, and that's a fiscal note, in order to be able to pay for it. But I think that we can actually put together some counties. If a county is too small, we can combine 2 or 3 counties to where those veterans that find themselves in that situation where they would be able to not have to drive for a long distance to be able to get the help that they deserve. So that would be my first bill that I would introduce.
All right, thank you. Sarah?
Well, the first bill that I would introduce is an increase to the state pay. There's no question. That would be the first avenue that I would want to march right down. If I was writing my own dream job, it would be that I serve on the Budget and Appropriations Committee so that I can be actively engaged in the discussions with regard to state pay. That issue has to be addressed, and that is the issue that's biggest for my district and my constituency, and I would want to repeat and echo their voices as quickly and as strongly as possible. I would want to serve on the committee because I've had years of experience in budgeting. It sounds silly to think that, I've managed my household, I've managed a small law firm, I've managed a large law firm, I've managed committees with large budgets, small budgets. I'm familiar with how dollars have to come in and dollars have to go out, and that the balance between the two. And I'd like to serve on that committee. I think I would be an asset to that committee. What I would like to, or feel like I have accomplished within the first year, I have 3 basic areas of focus that are of most importance to me right now. State pay, as I mentioned, taking every effort and making every step available to me to prevent, inhibit any further attacks on our labor organizations. The right to work action, they say it's not going to come back up again. It's going to come back up again. Any opportunity that they get to tweak it so that it can come back up, it's going to come back up again. And we need somebody there that's going to try and stop that. If it's not that, they'll start attacking prevailing wage next. And then the school funding formula. Our school children and our families need to go to school 5 days a week. The way that it's been tweaked is so that some schools only are able to go to school 4 days a week because they can't afford bus transportation. The school district itself can't afford to pay for busing on the 5th day, which then leads to the family having to provide care for their children on that 5th day. This is not benefiting anyone. So those would be my priorities during the first year.
Thank you. All right, next question will start with Sarah. It comes from readers Sue Gibson and Bob Haslag. Do you believe, you make reference to this, do you believe the August vote against Prop A, right to work, should be respected and considered settled, or that the legislature should keep trying to pass right to work type legislation?
Well, I think it should be considered settled. I believe that my district voted almost 60% to put down Prop A. I would be hard-pressed to be convinced of any other position other than it is wrong for Missouri. So I believe that this issue has been strongly settled, and I will oppose any efforts to bring it back up.
Dave?
I think the governor has already spoken on this. The governor said it's a dead issue. I think that I will tell you that I voted in favor of right to work, but I also believe that bureaucrats cannot make all the decisions for the entire state. And if the state of Missouri, and if the voters of the state of Missouri who overwhelmingly voted no on Prop A, I think it's a done deal.
All right. Next question will go with Dave. Proposition D is on the November 6th ballot. It seeks an increase in the state's fuel tax to fund roads and bridges. Do you support it? If so, why? And is it enough to address the issue? If you oppose it, why, and what would be a better option?
Well, I definitely support Prop D. I think that the people that I've talked with when I'm knocking doors, the rousing majority of those folks are in favor of it. I think that when we look at the number of roads and bridges we've got in the state of Missouri, we've got 10,400 bridges in the state of Missouri. 922 of those bridges have been declared poor, and we repair 90 bridges a year, and so we're falling behind even on keeping up with what we've got right now. Without doing something to help create some kind of infrastructure solution, our roads and bridges are going to continue to deteriorate. The 2.5 cents that we have over the next 4 years, going to 10 cents, is a great solution. I mean, it's not the total solution, but it's a good start. We haven't raised, 17 cents, we haven't raised since 1996. So we had 22 years where inflation has increased and our roads have gotten worse. And so we need to find a way to be able to address that situation. And Prop D is certainly a step in the right direction.
Thank you. Sarah?
I recognize that there's an element to Prop D that could be viewed as it being a bit of a regressive tax. I think I'm using the right word. Now I'm having a little brain freeze. But that those that make less will pay a higher portion of their income towards this tax. I recognize that. But I also recognize that all of us need to chip in to make Missouri a better place. And everybody should chip into the portion that they're able to do so. Those that are using and abusing our roads to the highest degree should pay the highest portion to keep them maintained and repaired. And all Missourians should be supportive and encouraged by the idea that an improved infrastructure within our state makes us more attractive to new business, more development, which leads to the economic success of the state. And so I am supporting and voting for Prop D.
All right, thank you. This question will start with Sarah. Reader Michael Lester asked, do you support Amendment 1, the Clean Missouri Constitutional Initiative? Explain why or why not, and does its presence on the ballot indicate a failure of the legislature to adequately regulate their own ethical behavior?
I do support Clean Missouri. I recognize that there are 4 elements to it that they're being attacked. The amendment itself is being attacked on this idea that it covers more than one issue, right? Transparency, the restriction on becoming a lobbyist for 2 years, the restriction on lobbyist gifts and campaign contributions, and then the redistricting issue. The redistricting issue does seem a little bit outside what would be considered, and the open records, access to government. All of the others are access to your legislature. I support it. I do believe that people have an obligation to know who you're voting for. I agree with that. But you don't get to live with me in my living room to know whether or not I'm going to be an honorable and ethical person. We're all supposed to be honorable and ethical. And if we would just follow the law, and if that was always the way, we wouldn't even be talking about the need for restrictions or regulations or limits on this, because people would be making the right decisions from the very beginning. But no, they have not. So yes, this is a reflection on the fact that, at least by the public at large, the legislature itself is viewed as an organization that is influenced by the outside money and not influenced by their inside constituents. It's sadness that we even have to, I'm sad that we even have to talk about it, because as a lawyer, we are on an honor code all the time. I swore an oath when I took the bar that I would uphold the Constitution and that I would never be deceitful in any form or fashion, and I have kept that. And I have to report to the Missouri Bar on my own. We have an honor code. It just doesn't work that way, unfortunately, in the public, and we're required to regulate ourselves in this regard.
Thank you. Dave?
I think the first thing that I want to say is do your homework. Clean Missouri is not what it seems on the surface. Sure, it sounds good. Clean Missouri. We all want a clean Missouri. But is this the right way of going about it? I don't think so. I mean, you look at the redistricting. We'll talk about that first. And the redistricting, the way it's going to be done, if you look at St. Louis is 80-20 Democrat to Republican. If you want to try and get to the 50-50 mark, what they're trying to do with this particular amendment, they're going to have to go as far south as Perryville or Cape Girardeau and as far west as Wentzville. And there's going to be a line that's going to be drawn. So the minorities that we have that live in the inner cities are going to be disenfranchised in not being able to be in touch with their constituents, with their representatives. And we can take that even here in Osage County and in Cole County. The lines that are drawn are going to be drawn by an elected official. Therein lies the problem. We have somebody, whether it's a Democrat or whether it's a Republican, you've got somebody that's elected that is making a decision on where those redistricting are going to go. You want to talk about gerrymandering, that's gerrymandering at its very finest. And as far as ethics go, we have a system in place right now with the Missouri Ethics Commission that really does a good job of monitoring the candidates. of being able to make sure that we're filling out the necessary forms, that we are being responsive to reporting all of the debts that we have, and reporting all the expenses we have, and reporting all of the donations that we've received. And if we don't, then there's a fine. There could be even greater repercussions from that. And I agree with Sarah. I think that we've got to elect good people, and people that have got integrity, and people that stand by their word, and can look you in the eye and tell you that they're doing their very best and that they are honest.
So a follow-up question, take a minute to answer it. Do you believe the current campaign finance laws, ethic laws, are sufficient as they are?
I absolutely do think they're sufficient as they are. I think we went through that reform a number of years ago, and I think that we've limited the amount of money that PACs can give you. We limited the amount of money that individuals can give you. We put stipulations on if you receive over a certain amount of money, you have to report that in 48 hours. So I think we've got steps that are in place that are going to hold us accountable. And I think that, to me, the system's not broken, and why would you want to do that?
Sarah, minute.
I think that the Missouri Ethics Commission does an amazing job, and I would give kudos to the employees there and the hard work that they do. But I don't know how many regular, everyday citizens go and check the Missouri Ethics Commission reports to know that I've received a certain amount of money over a certain amount of time. I think it's great that we have to give full disclosure. I just don't know that it works the way to deter us from being influenced, or from being at least viewed as being influenced by outside money. With regard to, can I address the redistricting issue just briefly? I know I don't have much time, but demographics is not party. It is a scientific, although the auditor will be hiring the individual, it would be based on demographics, not party. So this idea that it's 50% Republican, 50% Democratic, that is misinformation in my opinion. Because take from my personal experience knocking on doors, very few people identify one party or the other. So I don't even know how that would begin to work in that regard. In my understanding, it's just as to demographics, age, and the typical demographic characteristics, not party.
All right, thank you. All right, so both of you in Sunday's News Tribune, I'll give my little plug in here for the paper if you don't mind. We're talking about state pay, and it struck me a couple of the comments that you made. So let me read your comments first. Sarah says, I've spoken to a number of Democrats who serve in the House. The general consensus is that it's very frustrating. The bad part of what's developed in the General Assembly is that there is such a level of arrogance with the supermajority that they treat those across the aisle disrespectfully. Dave says, I'm going to build relationships with other legislators and convince them of the importance of our workforce. That's going to take some conversations. So that leads to my question. How do you plan to convince lawmakers from other parts of the state of Missouri that Missouri's government employees need better pay? This starts with Dave.
Okay. Well, I think that one of the things that was talked about earlier when the Senate folks were up here, and that is that here in Jefferson City, our state employees are the largest workforce in the district. So for us who live here in Jefferson City, we can see the importance of state employees and the importance of getting them the pay raises that compensation they deserve. When you get to outstate Missouri, and even if you get into Kansas City or St. Louis or Springfield, where they also have state employees, it's not as big a part of the workforce for them as it is. Mike Bernstetter over the last 8 years, and Travis Fitzwater over the last 4 years, they've each one of them tried to cross party lines and tried to be able to get them the compensation that they deserve. What I hope to be able to do when I'm elected is to be able to continue those conversations that Mike Bernstetter had, and to be able to work alongside Travis, and to be able to build those relationships and collaboration to make them see the importance of our state employees. They, so many of them, we refer to them, and I really hate the term, and I think they do too, that they're state workers. They're not state workers. They are public servants. And they do what they do because they have a passion for public service. Many of them could take jobs in the private sector and make a whole lot more money than what they make in working for the state. They do that because they like the benefits the state offers them. They like the pension plan the state offers them, but they also like the service that they're able to provide to their fellow man here in the state of Missouri, and especially here in Jefferson City. And we can't, I don't like being last in anything. And I don't think any of our legislators, Republican or Democrat, I don't think they like being last either. And through the retirement, through attrition, I think there are certain ways that we can look at it by looking at different departments and how we can reduce our workforce there to be able to increase the pay for those state employees. I think those are some solutions that we can look at.
Sarah?
Well, clearly the embarrassment of being 50th in the nation hasn't convinced anyone to take any action. So it fascinates me to some degree. If we hear that the governor or someone within the government is recruiting or soliciting a GE plant or an automobile manufacturing site, the state is excited with the idea that new business is coming to the state, which means new tax revenues and means new tax dollars. No one seems to look at the fact that the government itself is a business. Now, I get that we're paying our government to function, but those employees that have more than earned what they are being paid with their devotion to the work, because it is a public service. They are making sacrifices. They have stayed in that job and they have not received raises, and then their expenses have gone up and their retirement has become more distant. But yet they're here, and we fail to recognize the fact that by making that job itself, which is an important job, viable for a family to support itself, we are bringing revenue back to the state. We're bringing more people to the state. We're bringing attractive people attractive employees to the state. And it's a failure on the part of those that won't support the raise to recognize exactly what Nicole said in the first forum, that every business that comes to the state of Missouri, whether new or been here a while, has to deal with the state at some level at some time. And we want those businesses to come here. So they need to be given the service from our employees, the best that can be available to them. And I know a lot of state employees. I see them every day, and they are incredible people. And I know that they make sacrifices. But they're leaving because they cannot support their family on so our state, the services that the overriding state government, the state of Missouri is providing to others can be not the best that it should be. And if we can convince the Republican legislatures that that is the reality, that we're actually helping the entire state, not just the city of Jefferson or the 60th or the 59th, that is the approach to take to get them to pay true attention to this issue.
So I'm going to circle back on this question, and I'm dominating on it a lot because obviously in Jefferson City, state government employment is the largest employment sector in this area. Some things that both of you said that kind of struck me as we were going along here. I'd ask you each to respond to them. Dave, you'd suggested, for instance, one option for finding more money for state employees might be reduction of workforce. How much more reduction should the workforce take? In the last decade, thousands of state jobs have been cut, many in this city. How much farther can we cut that it doesn't affect services? Which then makes it even more difficult to make your argument that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So I circle back to, how do you talk to, specifically, if I'm a legislator from another district, how do you convince me from Northwest Missouri that we are in a crisis mode here and that we can't say to these state employees, maybe next year we'll address it? Because that's been the conversation for a decade. Maybe next year we can do better. What is better? What's the conversation need to be specifically?
Well, I don't want to correct you, but I'm not calling for a job to cut the workforce, to have slashes across each department. I think what I said was through retirement and through attrition that we can right-size the workforce to a place where we can look at compensation that's needed. one of the issues that we've got, and I think we should all be proud of it, and that is that the state of Missouri has a balanced budget. We don't operate at a deficit. And so when everything is taken care of, when we look at all the departments that we have that we're supporting to provide services for the state of Missouri, then when we get to the very end of the year, then we've got a certain amount of money that we've got there that we can dedicate to our state employees. We got and there's got to be a better way of doing it than that. We've got to have a more sustainable way of doing that. We've got to be able to give these folks an idea that indeed that we are not just pushing them aside and thinking, well, maybe next year, maybe, because if we do that, if we continue to do that, then what they're going to do is they're going to leave the state and they're going to find employment elsewhere. And when we lose them, we lose that institutional knowledge that they've got, the historical knowledge that they have over the years, and it takes a long time to be able to replace that. So I think looking department by department to see, is that department right-sized? Could we do something different there? I don't pretend in any way, shape, or form to have all the answers. And I think that that's part of what why the voters elect us, is to be able to go there and to listen to what our colleagues are saying in the House and in the Senate, and how we can collaborate and come up with a better solution. That's what I intend to do.
Sarah?
If I was to recall, your original question was how to get this to the attention of legislators not in our area, right? And how do I convince them? So everyone has a story of a difficulty they've had dealing with a state agency, but people treat them as if they're anecdotal. Yet everyone within the state, any legislator, one of their constituents, many of their constituents have likely had some issue. Now, I don't blame that on the state agency or the state employee specifically, but until it's brought home to them, the connection is made that in order for Missouri to be great, its infrastructure has to be great. And I don't mean roads and bridges, I mean also roads and bridges, but the workings within the government, the services that are provided. Everyone expects the state and the government to be Johnny on it and answer their questions and solve their problems and get them the information that they need. And so the fact that those that serve in the General Assembly now, excuse me, and don't recognize this is truly frustrating to me. They have the research, they have the bill writers, they have the researchers right there in the House that they rely on to write this legislation, and that they're underappreciated and underpaid, yet they're relying on those bills to get passed through and put on the floor. And I mean, David's right, it's going to be an uphill battle to convince these people, but it's an uphill battle I'm willing to climb and continue to repeat myself and to continue to try and find those persuadable individuals that will open their eyes to the reality of what must be done for the 60th. And all state employees, Joplin, Springfield, Kansas City, St. Louis, all of them deserve better than they've gotten from us.
All right, thank you. From Reader Stan Cowan, tobacco companies are fighting to weaken and delay court-ordered corrective actions. In Missouri, tobacco interests have hired many registered lobbyists to discourage legislation that would result in fewer people using tobacco. Given this information, would you pledge to not accept campaign contributions from tobacco and e-cigarette companies or organizations promoting their products? Support tobacco control legislation endorsed by the American Cancer Society, American Heart Association, and American Lung Association. And we'll start with Sarah.
I will never let the profit motivations of a company and industry dictate my policy positions when serving. And so no, I would pledge not to take any money from the tobacco companies, which I would assume is their motivation is to influence my decision to back legislation that continues to enhance their profits. As far as legislation sponsored or endorsed by those agencies or organizations that you mentioned, of course I'd have to see the legislation and know what the terms of the same were. But anything that, I believe that people have a freedom of choice, and it is a legal product, and if they want to smoke, they can smoke. I don't think that that's something that the government should step in and dictate to them but I'm always open to reading, researching, listening to legislation that allows freedom of choice, but would benefit the health and welfare of Missourians.
Dave?
Well, I think your first part of your question really is an assumption that by taking campaign contributions from tobacco companies or from lobbyists is going to influence the way that you vote. And to me, that's an insult. I will tell you that I have taken, received donations from PACs from across the state, but in conversations that I've had with them, I let them know what my values are. I let them know that they can't buy my vote. That what I stand for is going to be well known to them. There may be times when I'm in support of them. There may be times when I'm not in support of them. I think as far as the American Heart Association, the American Cancer Society, and Lung Association, I think those folks have all got a mission. And reducing deaths from smoking products, I think, is an honorable mission. I volunteered for the American Cancer Society. I was the chairman for Relay for Life. I worked with the American Heart Association. I was the chairman of the local board here. So I fully understand the need that we have of educating people, and especially starting to educate our young, that what are the effects of tobacco on them, and how can we mitigate them from doing that. I will agree with Sarah that it is legal, and for government to try and get into everybody's life is just wrong. I am for less government and for more empowering people to do what's right for them.
All right. Dave, this question goes to you. Sorry, I lost track of where I was at. This from reader Scott Randolph. In the past, the legislature has focused on cutting corporate and high-income tax rates as a way to encourage economic growth. Yet many companies cite the need for adequate transportation, infrastructure, health care, public and higher education, and state government services as essential to determining where they locate. If elected, what would be your approach to expanding economic development in the state?
I think that being able to provide opportunities for companies that are looking at a state that they want to be able to come into, there are a number of boxes that they want to check when they are coming into a state as to what you have. One of those boxes is right to work. We don't have that, so they can't check that particular box. One other box they want to check is how's your infrastructure? How am I going to be able to get my products, my supplies into my plant? And then once I've got the product finished, how am I going to be able to get that out to my customers? And with the system we've got right now, with the infrastructure issues we've got and our crumbling infrastructure we've got, then they can't check that box. So these are issues that we've got to be able to deal with as a state, to be able to make sure that we can check that box, that we can look at and assure them that the products that they've got are going to be able to get out to their customers and do it in an efficient way and in a safe way. We've got to figure out I-70. We just really, for those of you that ever drive I-70, it's just not a safe road in many places. And my daughter lives in Kansas City, and we drive up there, and there's construction going on that road all the time. And we've got to figure out how we can get things done in a more efficient way and in a safe way for people that are traveling across that interstate.
All right, Sarah?
Well, I would agree that continuing to cut the corporate tax rate has done nothing or very little to encourage corporate development and corporate investment here in Missouri. We are now top of the nation, number 2, or will be soon, with regard to the lowest corporate tax rate, yet we are nowhere close to being number 2 in the nation for business development and corporate enticing to come to our state. So if we're just looking for other ways to try and entice them, obviously fixing the roads and bridges is a fundamental, but also expanding broadband into rural communities is something that can be easily accomplished and can be not only beneficial and attractive to businesses, but to people throughout the state. I know that the co-ops here, at least locally, have been working hard to expand broadband to their members, and something that the state could do, the government could do, is entice or help, I keep using that word, to help these local energy companies expand their broadband into the rural communities, because by putting broadband out there with high-speed wireless, small businesses can develop in smaller areas with and still be able to get their products on the market and delivered to the individuals that they want. Fixing the roads and highways and bridges is absolutely necessary, but expanding broadband is just as important a leg in that stool as fixing the infrastructure physically. And developing and making sure and ensuring that our workforce here in Missouri is something that's appealing to businesses. We have an incredible institution here near us with State Tech. Ozark Tech is amazing. They turn out amazing young men and women with training, and that is something that the state can engage in continuing to bolster and to boost. And by having a strong, viable workforce that is willing to stay in Missouri, we will bring the businesses here.
All right, thank you. Last question from reader Melissa Hollingshead Wampler. Firearms are the second leading cause of death for American children and teens. And with the rise in gun violence in schools, what commitments and tangible actions will you take if elected to office to prevent gun violence in our community? And she cites background checks on all gun purchases, laws that keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people, keeping guns out of sensitive places, and ensuring guns are locked and stored out of the reach of children. Sarah.
Well, I'm a gun owner, and I believe that everyone has the right, that we all have the right to own a gun, but with that right comes a responsibility. And I don't believe we should be walking around taking away everyone's guns. I would never advocate for that. However, simple, reasonable legislation would move to prevent the gun violence that has plagued our schools and communities. Universal background checks, making sure all the proper agencies are communicating with each other so that everybody knows what everybody's background is. Why we don't have that, it boggles my mind. The idea of keeping firearms out of the hands of domestic abusers, of the mentally ill, of course. With that would be a natural result of universal background checks where all of this information goes into one system, and so that when the flags are raised and the red flag pops, that individual can't purchase a firearm. I think reasonable steps that don't impede on a person's constitutional rights to bear arms are something that the vast majority of people can get behind, and I support those types of actions.
All right, Dave.
Hey, the Second Amendment, I firmly stand behind the Second Amendment. I think that, and I'm also a realist in knowing that we've got an issue with guns in our country. I think mental health issues have a lot to do with that, but having some kind of trying to legislate good behavior is just not going to happen. And for us to be able to think that we can pass a bunch of laws that are going to keep these people from going into a school or going into a mall or going into a concert and shooting it up, it's just not going. That's not realistic. We've got to be able to identify those folks that have got issues, especially in our schools. If we want to protect our schools, what happened in February in Florida still etched on many people's minds as to all the young people that lost their lives there. What issues can be done? What lessons can we learn from that? And if we can provide better SROs in each one of the schools, if we can provide better training, if we can engage families in the conversation as well as engaging the students in the conversation as well, and not leaving them on the outside of on the other side of the wall, but being able to bring them into the room and have them tell us what are some ideas that you've got. And I think that we can certainly do something with better security in our schools as far as doors go, better training for our teachers and for our administrative staff that can have. But it really, to me, is a community effort that's going to have to be taken care of. And trying to legislate good behavior is just not a good method.
All right. Last question for both of you. Start with Dave. So both of you have been on the campaign trail for a few months now. primaries, and then followed in this general election. So what's the one question that that pesky News Tribune reporter never asked you that you feared that they were going to ask you? So Dave, you're up first.
Well, number one, I'm not afraid. But I think Joe has asked me almost every single question that he could possibly think of. But I think that one thing in people that I talk with and some of the things that they're concerned with are many of the things we've talked about here tonight. I think many of them are concerned with education. They're concerned that our kids that they're safe at school, that they're getting the kind of education that they need, that they're not just being passed along, that they are learning, and that we've got some standards in place that will be able to help them get through their education successfully. My focus in my campaign, and I've told everybody this that I've talked on their door, is my focus is going to be K through 12. I think we've got to be able to provide our children with a good base education. I'm a college graduate, so I appreciate higher education, but not every child is meant to go to college. And like Sarah said, we got a great resource over in Lynn with Missouri State Tech. And a lot of those kids that go over there, I talked with one man a few weeks ago that said his grandson just graduated from there with HVAC. He said, he's making more money than I am. And there's a good living that can be had, and it also addresses one other thing that Sarah said, and that's our skilled workforce. We got to be able to address that. And those are things that I think that I'm hearing from the public. And one thing that I think that the newspaper could do more of is really to talk about what the workforce issues that we've got here in our district here, but also throughout the entire state of Missouri.
All right, Sarah?
I'm going to sound like a copycat, but if I was to say the one thing that I don't think is getting as much play in this election as it should would be the school funding formula and our kids in the educational system. That would be something I would like to talk about in greater depth. I agree that the teachers that we have locally and throughout the state. My father was an educator for his entire life. Started out as a public school PE teacher. I mean, his first salary in 1967 was $2,700 a year. I found the contract at some point. And he devoted his life to the kids. And so appreciating those teachers, talking about how to provide an environment for our children that not only addresses the individual needs of the kids, some kids, what they each need as far as their method and their approach to learning, but also supporting these teachers and recognizing the sacrifices that they make. We ask them to not only raise our children 8 hours a day, but also to put their body in front of them when there's an active shooter in the building. We expect so much, and they need to be discussed, honored, treated fairly, and valued in the way that they actually deserve. So I think that the one question that Joe probably didn't ask me as much as I'd like to talk about it would be Missouri's approach to education and how we improve that and how we make Missouri a state that people are jealous of. They wish their kids went to school here. That would be something that I think would be of great benefit to everybody.
All right, thank you. And I remind both candidates we still are several weeks out from the election, so thank you for the questions that we will be posing to you here shortly. With that being said, it's time for closing statements. And so, Dave, we'll start with you.
All right, I want to tell all of you here that it would be a great honor to be able to serve you as your representative. I've worked my entire life in public service, and I see this as an extension of that. I've been endorsed by the Missouri Right to Life. I've been endorsed by the Missouri Fraternal Order of Police. I've been endorsed by the Missouri Chamber of Commerce. I've been endorsed by the National Federation of Independent Business, and I get the highest rating from the NRA. All those endorsements are fine, but really what counts the most is if you can believe in me, if you believe the way my belief is, and that is that we treat everybody equally, that we treat people with respect, and that I want you to know that I will always do my best for you, and that if you've got a question for me, I've got an answer, and the answer may not be what you want to hear, but it will be the truth. I told somebody the other day, I've got a terrible memory, so I can't lie, because the truth is always the truth. And my dad told me when I left home at the age of 19, He said, David, you're going to stand for something or you're going to fall for anything. And I'm going to stand for the people in the 60th District. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah?
Well, I agree. Serving the people of the 60th would be the greatest honor. And I'm committed to the idea and to hearing your concerns, to caring for your needs, and to fighting for Missouri families. I've spent my life, my adult life, in the trenches every day, picking people up when they were at their lowest, and I'm a fighter. That's what I am. I'm a fighter. This is not a last hurrah for me. This is not a final gig. This is something that I'm doing because I'm passionate about, and because I'm passionate about it, I want the people of the 60th to know that I'm passionate about you, and I am passionate for what you need from me. And you can count on me to not only shoot straight and tell you the truth, but also to advocate like there is no tomorrow in positions that I believe in and that will benefit the people of my district. So I'm looking forward to the next few weeks ending. Bluntly, I'm sure David is too, and some conclusion coming to this, but I appreciate everybody's time who's ever spoken to me, who's ever given me any attention at all. I am endorsed by a number of organizations as well. I won't go through the list because I'm hitting the time thing, but thank you, both of you, very much for this evening and for everyone who showed up. Thanks.
All right. On behalf of the News Tribune, I want to thank you for coming to this forum to submit to my questioning. I'd also like to thank the city again and JCTV staff for their assistance in putting this event on. In addition to the stories about the forum in tomorrow's News Tribune, we'll also be asking questions of candidates that we didn't get to tonight. We also have invited these candidates and those from the area races to attend our next Coffee with the Editor, which is going to be held from 8 to 10 o'clock Tuesday at Panera, Tuesday, October 23rd at Panera. I'd also share that our intent is to publish a voter's guide on November 4th that will lay out the candidates' positions on a variety of issues. And so, lastly, all of us here in the council chambers, as well as those who are listening on TV or online, I'd like to encourage you to get out and vote on November 6th. Our society is best served by an informed and active electorate, and at this point it's up to the voters to make the decision as to who they wish to represent them. So again, thank you for your participation, and I wish you a good night.